Dusk has fallen, and we are still winding through the forest clearings. There is a red glow in the sky. It is after a day of fighting burning the surrounding villages and partly the forests. And here is a long-awaited rest. Lieutenant Petrus Little is recruiting volunteers for the marching guard. I, together with Wolf and Iskra, join a few of those who want to join. I promised my second number, Wolf, that we'll take turns carrying ammunition and a machine gun. Listen, will you let me fire a couple of rounds too? He's got a lot of nerve. Sure, I immediately agree, fearing that the Wolf would not refuse the assumed duty. What would I do then? Corporal Hare confidently leads the marching guard. He is followed by our orderly Vernier. At an insignificant distance from the sentries are several soldiers from the platoon of Big, ready at any moment to open fire with automatic rifles. Here the clearing ends, and we enter the mire. The ground under our feet is shaking, and beneath it, in the depths, something gurgles ominously. The pace of the march slows down considerably. We move forward holding hands. As a guard, we no longer play any role, but we have no other way to overcome this quagmire. The artillery cannonade has long since subsided. Both sides are making preparations for further fighting. We strive at all costs to jump out of the cauldron, and the Germans are thinking about how to prevent us. This thought beats in my head even at the moment when I am knee-deep in mud wading through the pole swamp. Finally, we get out of the mire. Soon the forest ends. We stop. Trees fallen in all directions lie in front of us. This is a sure sign that we are approaching the Brest, Kovel Railroad. Back in early 1943, when partisans appeared in these places, the Germans first of all cut down the forest on both sides of the tracks to a width of 100 meters. These debris of fallen trees is difficult to overcome, especially at night. If a train is not approaching, will not the Germans give away their presence on the railroad tracks? The silence is broken only by the rumbling of the glorious corn plains, which probably delivered ammunition and equipment to the Soviet partisans. As quietly and cautiously as possible, we approach the embankment. Corporal Zayat sends 2 liaisons to the rear with the news that we are near the railroad. Once again, I stumble, and the branches that my comrade walking ahead of me let go hit me in the face. The last effort, and we are standing on the railroad bed. And yet we got out of the encirclement. Wildcat rejoices in a whisper. The commander of the squad sends in both directions along the railroad 3 men with machine guns to cover the passage through it partisan column. 2 leaves on the tracks, the rest go behind the embankment and take up firing positions. 1 pair of rails. Then another, someone invisible in the darkness, quietly explains either to himself or to the others. This is a very important railroad for the Germans. They use it to supply their troops. With weapons ready to fire, we lie down among the sparse dwarf birch trees. We lie like this until sunrise, gritting our teeth from the cold. A group of the 23rd Infantry Regiment leaves the encirclement. The rest of the units and units of the division get out of the trap in other places. We are still called a division, but it is no longer the same division that in March in Volhynia numbered almost 6,000 men. The same units and subdivisions still exist, only they have thinned considerably. The detachment Osnova, for this is the conventional name given to the grouping crossing the railroad, has a solid combat experience. Many comrades were killed in the battles, but those who survived will be able to fight courageously and fulfill any order of the command. The first day in the New Forests we spend near the railroad. German planes are constantly flying on the other side of the tracks. From there comes also artillery cannonade. Hungry before the evening, we get away from the railroad, along which several trains have passed during the day. It starts to rain in May, and it is getting cold. We pass through some relatively surviving village. The column is scattering to the houses in search of food. I run into the nearest hut. A family is having dinner at the table. Prostokvasha, jacket potatoes, and a loaf of black bread. Give me something to eat. I can't refrain from an immediate request. I greedily drink milk from the pot, put some boiled potatoes in my pocket and take the bread. I don't even say thank you. I quickly run out of the hut and join the stretched column. On the outskirts of the village, my comrades are taking sheaves of straw from the haystack. I do it together with Wolf and Wildcat. We carry the sheaves one by one and dream that we will sleep on dry, clean straw. It's getting light. The straw road we follow leads directly to our resting place, but it can serve as a good reference point for Hitlerites, so we are forced to change the area of the planned day's stop. At the crossroads of clearings, officers are standing and watch carefully so that no one carried away a straw on his clothes. Finally, the night crossing ends. We go deeper into the wet birch forest. Those who are not on duty fall on the ground and immediately fall asleep. Sergeant Bolshoi's platoon is guarding the camp. At about 11 o'clock, the Germans suddenly stumble upon it, and a firefight ensues, as a result of which we have 2 wounded. Hitlerites retreat. Fearing that we may be surrounded, we act earlier than planned. Partisans, who carry stretchers with the wounded, often change each other, as moving with a heavy burden among bushes and swamps, and even at night. An occupation quite tiring. One of the wounded begs to be left behind, but the commander does not want to hear about it. After a while, the road gets better. The most enterprising partisans bring from somewhere 2 wagons, on which Lieutenant Grief, one of our doctors, puts the wounded and sick. Now we move much faster. The forest ends, and we come to a field road, which is crossed by a small rivulet. The bridge is destroyed, so we cross it forward. Suddenly, something shines in the rear, and a moment later a great rumble reaches us. For a moment the column stops. Again a flash of fire, and again a furious rumble. They have found us. Someone shouts nervously in the darkness. But the explosions are not repeated. Some partisan runs up to us and explains in a voice interrupted by excitement. Oath wagons with the wounded and sick were blown up on mines. There is nothing to collect. And the column continues its hard way. Before dawn we pass a couple of kilometers more. We stop for rest near a farm lost among swamps, which has only a few miserable huts. It turns out that Soviet scouts have settled here. We enter into a conversation with them. The scouts willingly explain that a few days ago they crossed the front line. We are particularly interested in when the offensive will begin and how many kilometers from the front line we are. To the first question they are unable to give a concrete answer, and to the front line, according to their data, about 20 kilometers. 19 is excited by this news. One night crossing and we are behind the front line. The scouts, imbued with confidence in us, tell us about the Polish army under the command of General Berling, formed in the USSR. This extraordinary news spreads with lightning speed among the partisans. A pilgrimage to the Soviet soldiers begins. Everyone wants to hear something personally about the Polish troops. Around noon we learn that Osnova, i.e. our group, is the first of the units of the 27th Infantry Division to break through the German front at Pripyat and cross over to the Soviet side. We are very happy that it is us who have been given this important task. Everyone's spirits are high. Everyone's spirits rise at the thought that tomorrow we will be on the Soviet side. How will we be received there, and in how many days will we be in the real Polish army? As usual, after darkness falls, the partisans become animated. The first to leave are the groups assigned to the advance guard. At the end of the column is a transport of wounded Soviet soldiers. Together with us, they must cross the front line. We go through forest tracts, observing absolute silence. We do not stop during the march. Around midnight, rockets go up. They brightly illuminate the neutral strip, and it seems to us that it is quite close. I even have the impression that the line separating the opposing sides is somewhere behind the nearest bushes or a bend in the forest path. It's starting to get light. The rockets are losing their brightness, and we still haven't reached the front. On the clearing along which we are walking, there are several field telephone cables. There is a noticeable excitement among those walking. At last we see the edge of the forest and clearly visible German tree and earth fortifications. Behind them are barbed wire fences and reclamation ditches full of water. Far away, among the meadows, flows hidden in the morning fog Pripyat. On its other bank, the land free from the occupants. Our weapons are ready for battle. Slowly, step by step, we are approaching the German trenches. Here they are, here is still warm but empty. Hitlerites disappeared somewhere. Together with Wolf and Iskra we break into the first dugout that got on our way. There is a machine gun near the observation slit. Nearby, on a bench, lie 5 helmets filled with ammunition and a few hand grenades. A telephone set hangs from the log ceiling on a tarpaulin strap. We hastily grab it all and throw it into the nearest water ditch. The other dugouts, our comrades, do the same. We get out of the trenches. Wolf, with the butt of a carbine, makes a passage in the wire barriers. I unsuccessfully jump over a wide reclamation ditch and plunge into a swampy slurry up to my neck. Zazavita rescues me from my predicament. There are more and more partisans in no man's land. But the Germans have come to their senses. They open a barrage of guns and mortars. Around us, fountains of swamp water are rising. In a minute, machine guns join them. The first bursts pass high above our heads. Confusion begins among the guerrillas. To the left, it's shallow. Some of them are calling. To the right, there's a bridge. Others shout. These cries add to the confusion. We rush to one side or the other under the rapidly intensifying Hitlerite fire. And what is even worse, from the opposite, saving for us bank also begin to beat machine guns. Someone hysterically shout. Guys, the Germans are there too. It's the end of us. Betrayal. Meanwhile, the best swimmers have forced Pripyat, and now shout in the direction of the trenches visible near the fire. Don't shoot. They're ours. After these shouts, the fire from the other bank immediately stops. But not so soon the pain and resentment for the losses suffered at the hands of their own men subsides. In the turmoil of battle, I lost sight of Wolf and Iskray. I sprint toward Pripyat. In the ditch, past which I run, chest deep in water, stand Corporal Dare, Lieutenant Metko, and Mistletoe. They are firing off long machine gun bursts. We run up to the riverbank. Driven by the whistle of shells, in full uniform with weapons, I jump into the water and try to swim. However, the equipment pulls me down and I start to sink. Bereska, who is not far away, helps me to get ashore. Throw it all in the water, he advises me, or you won't be able to swim to the other side. The main thing is to keep your head in one piece. On the other side they will give us new weapons. Indeed, at this time the river is playing out a terrible scene. The wide and lazy flowing waters of the Pripyat attract those who can't swim well, especially if they try to swim across the river in full uniform, as I did a moment ago. More and more people who can't swim are congregating on the shore. They try to make some semblance of a rope out of the clasped rempes they have fastened together, pull it over to the other side, and thus ease themselves across. The rope is barely fastened, and the mass of people rushes into the water. One of the straps cannot withstand bursts, and many begin to drown, and the German machine guns are still firing furiously. I lie, squeezed between the bumps, and I see Molly, who has recently been made a subaltern, running up to the shore. He hastily strips naked and jumps into the water, and I have nothing to wait for. I throw off my overcoat, uniform, boots. I throw the machine gun into the water and swim. I swim slowly, measuredly, saving my strength. From behind I hear some joyful, excited shouts. I look back and see lightning running along the shore and calling loudly, "Ma, follow me. There is a bridge not far up the river." I do not go back. I believe in my own strength. After all, I was taught to swim by Corporal Map Target, and my friends nicknamed him Torpedo for a reason. Even so, I swim slower and slower, barely able to move my arms and legs. My eyes are getting darker. Well, a little more, it's close to the shore. I try to give myself vigor and make the last effort. At last I feel the saving ground under my feet. I frantically grab the reeds with my hands. I rest for a minute. Still out of breath, I climb out of the water. My legs gradually regain their former strength. Next to me climbs with a shot palm wall. In the meadow I see the Baranski spouses, who rushed towards the Soviet trenches. We both follow their example. Above us artillery shells cut the air with a screech. 4 fountains of explosions rise in front of us. Baranski fall. Both are wounded. Another shell bursts not far from me and sprays me with sticky mud. A searing pain shoots through my right leg. I look at it and see blood dripping down as the shells whistle again. I fall down and search with my eyes for some hollow where I could hide. The shells are falling farther and farther away, almost at the Soviet trenches. A few meters from me lurks wounded in the face wall, and near him, a bloody sub-guard with a pistol in his hand, and a young guy with a severed foot. "Sleeper it," shouts he in a ghastly voice. The sight of the wounded brings tears to my eyes. I can't do anything to help them, and no one is rushing to my aid. I try to move the toes of my wounded leg. I feel no pain. I get up. "Stay down. There are a lot of mines here," warns the wounded lieutenant. I look around. Indeed, 2 steps away from me, I see a POMS 2 mine lurking in the grass. Further ominously displaying moustaches, others stick out. On the top of each of them is a star-shaped wire. Even not knowing how to handle mines, I guess, just touch it, and the fuse will go off. The mine will explode. I lift my foot and carefully step over the shiny wire. It's gone. Here is another wire. and I step over it again. Not more than 40 to 50 meters away from me are trenches. A Soviet soldier standing on the barrier gesticulates desperately and shouts loudly to, "Stop, stop. Where are you going? There's a minefield here. You will explode." I will pass. I answer and stubbornly step further, being even more careful. So far, everything is going well. And here I am already in the trench next to 2 Soviet soldiers, a machine-gun crew. The older one looks at my wounded Lee. "Let's go, we must bandage it as soon as possible." We enter a shallow dugout. The sergeant sits me on a chock and washes my bleeding wound with water from a kettle. His individual bag is missing. "Monsieur, he calls, 'Give me your bag.'" A soldier, who had recently shouted at me from the bunker, enters the dugout, unties the bag hanging on a wooden hook, and gives me a bandage. The sergeant, like a professional orderly, wraps it around my leg. I look at the soldier's household with interest. In one corner there is a pile of straw covered with a cloak tent. On a hook hangs another duffel bag with a smoked kettle attached to it. On a shelf, hastily made of an old board, lay 2 pieces of black bread. I don't look at the rest. Saliva appears in my mouth. I can't help myself and ask, "Give me some bread." Almost simultaneously, the soldiers reach for the bread and give it to me. What beautiful bread! It tasted like a delicacy and instantly disappeared into my empty stomach. I look around the dugout hopefully. "We have nothing else," Vasya explains in a business-like manner. "Now smoke," he continues, pulling out a kitsit with makorka and a piece of newspaper. "I don't smoke." "Then we'll smoke," he says, and deftly rolls a thick cigar. "Are you a Pole, my son?" "A Polish partisan." I answer, "Yes," says the sergeant in thought. "It's not good, we made a mistake. Well, it happens. After all, we thought that it was the Germans who were attacking. Well, now if you can walk, go to the sanitary station. They'll examine you there, give you something to eat." I get up carefully. I say goodbye to the hospitable soldiers and slowly, limping, wander along the message to the rear. At the forest road the trench ends. I climb out of it, and after a few dozen meters I come across a group of our partisans talking about something with Soviet soldiers. Subaltern Molly is still naked and clacking his teeth. A Soviet soldier approaches him and holds out his overcoat. Molly thanks him. Some lieutenant tells us to go to the field kitchen, which stands around the next corner. We all head there together. The smell of fried onions wafts from behind the trees. The healthy ones are hurrying, overtaking the wounded. There's the kitchen. Near it, a classically fat cook is frying pork fat with onions. When he sees us, he explains, "Just a minute more. You don't have wok, so get some canning jars." I don't have spoons, unfortunately. A mustachioed foreman comes out of the dugout and, looking at us, commands, "Line up in a line. The wounded will be fed first." "You see," says Grom, wounded in the leg and arm, "where the army is, there is order." We get a little jar of thick millet porridge, well seasoned with stew and pork fat with onions. Burning our lips, we greedily empty the cans. A large group of Soviet soldiers gathers around us. Soon several officers come and form a marching column. I try to get up, but only now I feel how much my leg hurts. A Soviet officer approaches me. "Rest, now the wagons will arrive," he said. Part of the partisans leave. Only more than a dozen wounded remain near the kitchen. The cook treats everyone with real Georgian tea. Sanitary wagons are arriving and the medics help the wounded to get loaded. On the road we overtake our lightly wounded partisans resting on the roadside. Above them rise thick puffs of smoke from self-circles, which they greedily smoke. Excited, we ask each other about friends and acquaintances. At last our carts arrive at a lonely forest gatehouse, over which flies a flag with a Red Cross sign. There are a large number of ambulances around, near which there is a noticeable revival. The wounded are put on stretchers. Nurses deliver tea and wheat bread, change or adjust bandages. We are given injections and we are off on the road again, this time in ambulances. Each car has an orderly or orderly. Our attendant comforts us that soon we will get off the typically Polesian, muddy and bumpy road onto a better one and drive faster. Some of the wounded are asleep, others sit in silence, others moan and ask for a drink. And still it is the first quiet evening in the distant rear. Finally, the column of cars stops. Sanitarians set stretchers with the wounded under the spreading linden trees near the house of the priest. which houses the operating room. We learn that all the houses of the village are used for the needs of the field hospital. The junior staff of the auxiliary medical service begins to work. We are directed to the bathhouse. By the light of smoking kerosene lamps, several soldiers fill out medical histories. Here, behind a screen, we are stripped of our stinky clothes and taken away for disinfestation. Then follows the not entirely pleasant procedure of a full shave. And then they cover my wounded leg with oilcloth and carry me on a stretcher to the shower. For the first time in months I am washed with hot water and soap, and I feel an incomparable pleasure. Then they put on my needlepoint underwear, put me on a stretcher, cover me with a blanket, slip my medical history under my arm, and carry me to the priest's house. In front of the doors of the operating room there is a line of people waiting in tense anticipation. 2 white figures approach my stretcher. From their voices I determine that they are women. The operation is quick and almost painless. Through the glasses of metal-rimmed glasses, the doctor's affectionate eyes look at me attentively. She has sweat on her forehead. "We will not take out the fragments, she says. They quickly make a bandage, then one drainage another. Now they lubricate the wound with some liquid, put a thermometer, give an injection, and all my fears are over. Next I hear, they're taking me out. There's still a long line outside the doors of the operating room. It's dark outside. It smells of cut grass. Here is the hut, into which I am brought on the shoulders of an orderly. The nurse on duty points to a large stove. Put him there. On this unusual hospital bed lie already 2 comrades in misfortune. No sooner had I settled down than the nurse served goulash with buckwheat porridge and fragrant tea on a tin plate made from a tin can. 15 minutes later, another colleague arrives to join us on the stove. Finally, they turn down the light. It's time to sleep. But sleep does not come. I can smell iodine and kerosene in the hut. The wounded are moaning. In addition, the bedbugs make themselves known. I remember the events of the last 24 hours. For the second time in a row, I count to 1,000. But there was no sleep. It's getting light outside. I start counting again. A short sleep and someone wakes me up. I open my eyes, a nurse hands me a thermometer. I look around. On the floor, rows of stretchers with the wounded. A pale man lies by the window. Where his legs should be, the blanket is tight against the stretcher. After breakfast, a doctor comes to see us. Those who are able to move go out into the sun. The rest lie chained to the stretcher and the stove. The first threads of acquaintance are made. I look at the man at the window. Finally, I. No. Did you have a hard time? He doesn't answer. 2 wounded men with bandages on their hands come in and address him from the door. How are you, Kostya? So it's a Soviet soldier or a partisan. I live, they comforted him cheerfully. Listens, looking at the ceiling, but does not answer anything. One of Kostya's comrades takes out 2 spoons from the pocket of his hospital gown and begins to beat the beat deftly with them. Give me a harmonica in my hands. He hums. Lying beside me on the stove bar, Mr. Griff says with surprise in his voice. These are extraordinary people, Russians. They die with a song on their lips. The nurse brings the second breakfast. Only now I find out what tragedy happened to the son of Varmistra Ponselyusha Bronislaw, known to us under the nickname Mars. At first glance, a seemingly harmless wound received in the cheek from a stray piece of shrapnel led to the paralysis of half of his body and loss of speech. Looking at the boy's greying head, the Vachmaestro, who had seen a lot of grief and blood during his soldiering service, could not refrain from tears. Soviet doctors and nurses do not leave us with care and attention, and our health is improving day by day. Sergeant J. War, the Baransky couple, and many other seriously wounded were evacuated to Rostov-on-Don to Hospital No. 5343. On June 1, in the afternoon, we were visited by the deputy head of the hospital. He announced that in a few days we would go to the Polish hospital, but before that an officer of the Polish army would visit us. The joy that swept over us is hard to describe. Indeed, 2 days later a young sub-lieutenant came to see us. The whole partisan fraternity almost had their eyes popped out at the sight of a real Polish uniform. The officer told us about the First Polish Army, about the battle at Lenin, a village unknown to us, answered our questions and informed us that the army was not far from Lutsk and was ready to take part in the battles for the liberation of our homeland. See you soon in the Polish army. The officer said goodbye to us. Oh, how long these 2 days, which separate us from meeting our compatriots, are stretching. Here in the Soviet hospital, we are very well, but everyone wants to go home to their countrymen. In June 5, from the very dawn the hospital was buzzing with activity. We Polish partisans were leaving for the Polish hospital. Breakfast, dry rations for the road, a hearty farewell and W into the cars. Sister Junior from our ward, good-natured, not young anymore, is quietly crying. Each of us thanks her for her care and cordiality. Junior wipes her eyes with her apron and says, "Beat eagles, fascists, but do not get to the hospital." I assure her that we will fulfill her wish. Cars are moving off. The hospital staff waves us goodbye with handkerchiefs. Our junior starts crying again, and through her tears she shouts loudly, "Don't forget, right?" The weather is beautiful. Not a cloud in the sky. Along the roadsides the birch trees, which are many here, are green and the birds are chirping happily. Trucks and ambulances are taking us farther and farther away from the Soviet hospital every minute. Around noon, the vast forests finally come to an end. The convoy of cars passes Kamenkashevsky, which was very badly damaged during the hostilities. Outside the town, we see a long row of cars standing on the roadside with white and red flags. "Guys, it's ours," shouts Bronek Nosal. "Us," echoed by the others. Where? Someone asks. "Over there, see." Bronek shows his hand. Polish cars. Hurrah! We shout at the top of our voices. We stop. Polish soldiers are running towards us. They "Long live the partisans. Long live the Polish army." We try to respond to the cordial greeting, but we do a little worse. "Is there anyone here from Lvov, Lublin?" We hear questions from all sides. Unfortunately, this time no one manages to find fellow countrymen. We look at the soldiers with interest and ask, as we did 2 days ago to a Polish officer, "What is our army like? Does it have tanks and airplanes? When will the fighting for the liberation of our homeland begin?" Friendly greetings and conversations are interrupted by officers who appear. They warn us that a long journey awaits us and give orders to reload the wounded onto Polish motor transport. Polish nurses start to work, assisted by the drivers of both convoys. "Good trucks," exclaims admiringly Grom. "Those with 3 driving axles are probably American. Thinks aloud, sexy girl? I really want to be loaded on an American car, but I find myself in the back of a far from new Z's. We say goodbye to the Soviet drivers and set off. Zis perfectly moves along the sandy road and even overtakes several Studebakers. Along with us rides a nurse. She tells us a lot about our army, explains that when addressing a superior commander and senior in rank, it is necessary to add the word citizen, that when giving a report is no longer used, I have the honor to report, and that in companies and above there are officers for political and educational work, to whom you can turn for help in any difficult case. You, sister, be kind. Tell us something about the weapons you have. You asks Mushroom. Oh, there are a lot of weapons and different. When you get better, try to get into the artillery. And why? I do not understand. First, you will ride in a car. Secondly, you know that artillery is the god of war. My sister says it right, Supports her grib. Only all of us probably, in the artillery, will not be taken. Anyway, try your best. Some of us may succeed. We're all chatting, and I've got a thermos of hot tea for you. Who wants a yarn? All of you, sister. Verheister Ponsiliuish unwraps the food package we got for the road from Soviet comrades. The package contains 6 black breadcrumbs, a piece of heavily salted lard, 2 cubes of some concentrate, a pinch of tea, and 4 pieces of sugar. We are somewhat disappointed. Not happy with the breadcrumbs and lard. Shame on us. We, before we joined the army, received much less. In the Soviet Union, everything goes to the needs of the front, and here you are. I see that they spoiled you in the hospital. We were given raisin compote for lunch, and these breadcrumbs for the road. Sergeant Caban is trying to justify himself. You still have a lot to understand, guys. The nurse finishes the conversation and pours tea for everyone. At dusk, the cars pass the village of Bishibrash. On the road signs, the name of the village is written twice, in Polish and in Russian. Soon we will be there, my sister informs me. We enter the forest. A sentry raises the barrier. Behind it, in the depths, there are tents. The Polish flag flies on a high mast. Soldiers are running towards us. Our car came second, that's probably why they are so interested in us. We part with the driver of the Z's. The wounded are carried on stretchers to the distribution centre. Here they look through the medical records and sort the wounded into tents. I get into the one where several of our partisans from the first vehicle and soldiers from the artillery brigade are already lying. I am placed in the second tier. I had no sooner come to my senses from the road, and already dinner is served. A nurse in a snow-white apron, with painted lips, forbids any conversation. You'll have plenty of time for chatter. For now, the wounded and sick must sleep. She extinguishes the oil lamp and leaves the tent. Thunder waits a moment and sighs. You can see there are other sisters in a different order here. This is not our Dunya. Just when you groan, she is already near you, already asking what's wrong with you. Here, as it seems to me, you'll have to moan a lot to ask for something. Through the tarpaulin walls of the tent, we can hear the noise of cars and conversations. This is the arrival of the other wounded. The first day in the Polish hospital begins with the joyful news. The Allies have landed in France. After breakfast and medical rounds, the deputy head of the Hospital for Political and Educational Work holds short talks on this topic in the tents. After lunch, correspondents of the newspapers Zajkęzimy come to the hospital and interview wounded partisans. Suddenly I got chills and fever. The next day after the doctor's visit, I was transferred to the isolation ward. Arif is already lying here. He is from here, and his mother and sister visit him. They bring food and talk about what happened in these parts during his absence. The fever is still raging. I undergo a series of tests, including X-rays. I am prescribed a bunch of medicines, among them quinine, and then I have a blood transfusion. The address of the donor, a Kazakh woman, is written on the bottle with the life-giving liquid. The doctor who transfuses the blood recommends that I send a letter of thanks to Kazakhstan. Finally, the fever subsides and I return to the general tent. I tell the soldier of the motor brigade about the letter and ask him if he has an envelope and paper. We send triangles without envelopes. What triangles? I am surprised. That's all. The political officer brought me the paper. I wrote the letter myself. The artilleryman wrote out the address with a pencil, folded the letter into a triangle, and the rest was up to the field mail. Variety in our hospital life brings a film show, and once even the Army Theatre Group came to us. We warmly applaud the artists in soldiers' uniforms, who showed us a fun program. Every day we feel better and better. I'm already trying to walk without crutches, but I'm not very good at it yet. One day we are visited by the former commander of our partisan battalion, Lieutenant Hare, as well as good acquaintances from the 1st Company. Squad leader Sergeant Hare, Corporal Wildcat, Wolf, and others. Both Wenceslas were sent to the artillery, which the nurse praised so much. Joseph and Edik are enrolled in the 1st Infantry Division, the rest in other army units. After this visit, time drags even slower for us. Finally, the first group of partisans is discharged. I, like many others, stay in the hospital for a few more days, and then with another group of discharged, I get to the empty camp near Kivertsi, where the partisans of our group took the oath. The pine forest that stretched along the railroad is noisy and silent. The dugouts are empty. Here remained only a small intendant group, which is liquidating the remaining from the partisan camp of Captain Garda Farm. From the hospital, we are brought here by truck. Our group of 17 men is commanded by Kaban, a former partisan from the mounted reconnaissance of the partisan division, who has recently been promoted to the rank of senior sergeant, while representatives of the intendant's service are selecting uniforms for us at the army warehouses. We are inspecting the place where the oath-taking ceremony was recently held. Numerous names and nicknames are written on many specially peeled pine trees with chemical pencil. Our comrades have organized a search bureau in this way. In the camp commandant's tent, there is a military commissariat. Here they decide who is to be sent to which unit. Nearby, by car, there is an outfitting station. We receive new uniforms. I cannot find the right shoes. Finally, I choose boots 2 numbers bigger. I quickly put on a real Polish uniform. The narrow tarpaulin belt looks a little ugly, which the witches instantly nicknamed Wick, but the Confederate uniform with the pierced eagle fits me perfectly. I shove the corners of the cap inside and head for the clerk's office. Personal information, year of birth, 1928. What? Do you have your parents' permission to join the army? I have no parents here, Mr. Captain. My mother was left behind the lines and my father died in a Nazi prison. I don't need to deal with young boys. Why are you grinning like that? Don't spit on me. You'll join the 3rd Infantry Division. That's all. Got it? Yes, sir, Citizen Captain. Next. According to the order we've received, we're going to our destination. We're being led by Staff Sergeant Jaworski, not a Chief Sergeant, but a Staff Sergeant, because we'll be serving not in the cavalry, but in the infantry. To the headquarters of the 3rd Infantry Division named after Romuald Traugutta. We are dropped off by a hitchhiker. His interest in us increases immeasurably when he learns that we are former partisans, about whom the army newspaper Zvikenzimi has written several times. True. We are not exactly on the road, but we have to deliver the partisans to the right place, says the driver. After lunch, we report our arrival at the division headquarters. The officer on duty shows us the nearest empty dugout and informs us. This is the divisional brig. At the moment it is empty, so you will spend the night there, and in the morning you will get directions to the regiments. A group of soldiers gathers near our place of lodging. They take us to the kitchen for dinner. After a delicious meal, we tell the soldiers about life in the occupied country and the battles we have fought. So our service begins with a night in the brig. In the morning, the same duty officer comes and orders us to report to the division headquarters immediately after breakfast. The cook smiles and says to the soldiers standing in line, "We should be hospitable, feed our arrestees out of turn." We amicably put up our wokes, and he pours us a double portion of thick soup with macaroni. We don't have spoons yet, so we drink the soup directly from the kettle, helping ourselves with a crust of bread. The personnel officer quickly organizes our personnel files. I try to mention artillery, but he only grins in response. Oh, infantry regiments have guns too. If you're very lucky, you'll get assigned to a battery. Soon we are assigned to the 9th Infantry Regiment. A short walk through the woods, and here we are. Staff Sergeant Jaworski goes to report on the arrival of the group, and the rest are waiting near the tents and dugouts of the regiment headquarters. In a few minutes our commander returns with a group of officers. We are lined up in a row. Since I am the smallest, I take the last place on the left flank. The arriving officers look at us carefully. "How old are you?" The captain addresses me. "That is 13, Citizen Captain. Maui, I answer. "Would you like to be my orderly?" "I'd like to join the artillery." "Yes. Too bad. You would have been fine with me." He smiles. Standing next to me in the ranks, lazy, an elderly man, approvingly kisses through his teeth. It's right to refuse. Only those who evade frontline service go to such posts. Eventually I was assigned to the 5th Infantry Company of the 2nd Battalion. The battalion was commanded by Major Anton Drozdov, and the company was commanded by a former partisan commander, Lieutenant Ehlers. To begin with, I am instructed to restore order in the alleys, so I appear in the company only in the evening. After dinner, I'm immediately called off. For the night I settle down in the hut of the 2nd Squad of machine guns. The silence of the awakening morning is broken only by the measured footsteps of the sentries and bird trills. Along the smooth alleys, carefully swept and sprinkled with yellow sand, there is a long row of small houses made of poles and covered with tents. From behind thin walls, one can hear the deep breathing of soldiers tired from exhausting exercises. The smell of cooking food wafts from the nearest clearing. When the rattle of the cauldrons becomes unbearable, and the senior cook, Corporal Herman, shouts at his subordinates to turn around faster, otherwise they will not have time to prepare breakfast in time. The 2nd Battalion's day watchmen wake up the company sergeants on duty. True, according to the order they should be awakened 15 minutes before rising, but it is difficult to demand this from soldiers who do not have watches. Just before rising, the officer on duty comes out of the tent with the trumpeter. The signalman climbs a special tower and waits for the officer's instructions. S'il plaît, he commands. From this moment and until bedtime, trumpet signals regulate the daily routine. The trumpet sounds iridescently, and a break in classes is announced. It caresses the ear especially pleasantly before dinner. Take a spoon, take a tank, there is no bread, eat like this. Immediately after the signal, the previously dead forest comes to life. Rise. Wake up, get up, is heard all around. I haven't had time to put on my uniform yet, and the duty officers are already announcing the formation for the morning exercise. Until when will you wear a shirt? You haven't even wrapped your shoelaces yet. Should I call your mom for help? This is how the company's Sergeant Major Branislav Mazurek encourages us. Almost a year's stay in the partisan detachment was not in vain for me. Not everything is so difficult and terrible as some of our junior commanders would like to imagine it. I comfort myself. Worst of all, it seems, shoelaces, but in the partisan detachment has been worse. And maybe in the beginning a need to shout like Petty Officer Mazurek. At the first morning exercise I feel a little insecure, and this is primarily because I am the youngest soldier in the company, not only by experience, but also by age. In the partisan detachment we're mostly young people. Here, on the contrary, the elderly prevail. We run to the nearest ditch to wash up. As shadows we are accompanied by a sergeant on duty and the company foreman. Mo. Faster. Faster move. And they shout in turn. In spite of this prodding, the head of the column stops, and we correct our boots. I come to the conclusion that before the morning exercise they should not be wound up at all, as they slip off during the run. After washing up, we put our rooms in order. It is not difficult at all, because there is nothing there, except for temporary bunks and chumps for sitting. A soldier's day consists of a number of formations. After charging, we go to prayer. For 10 minutes only the singing of psalms is heard. While some units begin prayer, others are already finishing it. Our company is located near the battalion kitchen, and as soon as we catch a glimpse of someone marching to breakfast, we hurry to wrap up as quickly as possible. Private Coper, a tailor, waits with particular impatience for the end of prayer. More than once he is scolded for showing impatience, but Coper pays no attention to it. He has his own worries. He worries about the fate of the family he left behind in Lvov, about whether he will have time to sew and fit all the overcoats and uniforms. After all, there are many companies and batteries in the regiment, and the sewing machine in the unit only one. Formation for breakfast. We stand in 2 rows. There is a morning inspection. The duty officer reports to the petty officer about the number of personnel, and he checks the kettles and spoons, passes in front of the ranks and sends some soldiers to wash it. "Where's your spoon?" He turns to me. "I haven't received it yet, Citizen Senior Sergeant." Scribe, bring the spoon here. In a minute, the clerk hands me a wooden, beautifully painted spoon. It turns out that it has great advantages. Even the hottest food can be eaten with it without fear of getting burned. After breakfast, during the formation for classes, the petty officer introduces me as a newcomer to the company commander. In the commander I recognize Lieutenant Ehlers. He greets me like an old acquaintance and asks me about the other wounded. The company marches to class, and Ehlers and I sit down on a bench near his dugout and talk. He is interested in the details of his stay in the hospital, and I am interested in life in the company. Our memory involuntarily returns to the partisan times. "These soldiers," he says, "mostly have never even smelled gunpowder, and most of them are old men who have only the bitterness of wandering life behind them. They come from western Ukraine and Belarus, many Silesians and residents of Pomorye, who escaped from service in the Wehrmacht. Now you understand why you can't really chase them. They'll get out of breath, cough, and one by one they'll reach for Zenka. Such an army is not for me." What do you mean, reach for Zenka? Yes, you don't know. It's a battalion paramedic. He gives you a release from classes, and fathers clean up the territory instead of training. Sometimes they go potato picking. They have to do something. Aren't there any young soldiers? 20 to 30-year-olds are very few. In other companies there are, but that's in other companies. Our conversation is interrupted by a sergeant on duty. He comes up in a regimented step, and Citizen Lieutenant. The battalion commander, Major Drozdov, asks you to come to him? All right, I'm coming. Alice looks at me and, as if in justification, adds, Probably Anton is gathering commanders in connection with tomorrow's shooting. When I come back, we'll talk again. I look at him until he disappears among the trees. You know each other. I hear from the side. A few steps away from the bench where I am sitting stands the company commander. I jump up and stand at attention. That's right, Citizen Senior Sergeant, still on the partisan detachment. I answer, let's sit down. He's a worldly guy. He loves the army. He doesn't tolerate slackers. Cooper won't forget him for the rest of his life. No, I probably won't either. Oh, he gave us a lot of work. During training, before giving an order, he would show us how to do it, but then he would demand exact execution. Hey, the guys are afraid of him, but they love him too. Unless I don't finish something, That's the kind of commander the soldiers respect. They'll follow him in fire and water. Come on, let's go. You're supposed to get a gun. Can you shoot? A. Be calm, citizen senior sergeant. I hate to brag, but I'm a good shot. It was the subaltern who taught me that. We enter the dugout where the company armory is located. As soon as my eyesight gets used to the darkness, I distinguish the weapons, evenly laid out in rows on the cloak tents. One beside the other are long rifles with thin bayonets tied to the breech blocks. Near the wall are 2 handheld machine guns. Nearby lie several 10-shot CVT. Behind them a PPS, the object of special envy of the partisans, and some other weapons, carefully covered with several numbers of Zykenzimia. I pick up one of the papers and freeze with admiration when I see a sniper rifle. Such a rifle would suit me, I think to myself. However, the petty officer does not pay attention to my delight and orders me to sign for an ordinary rifle, gas mask and devices for cleaning weapons. Maybe the one with a telescopic sight, citizen senior sergeant. I ask incredulously. You want a lot, answers the petty officer. Such rifles get only the best shooters, and then personally from the company commander. Don't be picky. Take what they give you and run to clean it. That's right, I answer. I turn around and go out, catching the end of the long barrel on the low ceiling of the dugout. Be careful, or you'll catch the fly. I hear in the wake. I sit down on the moss and slowly start to clean the rifle, but I think about the one with telescopic sight. From somewhere around the bend, I hear singing. From over the mountains and rivers we came to the shore. I interrupt my work and listen to the melody of an unfamiliar marching song. The singing comes closer and clearer. I clearly distinguish the words, full of longing for my native country. Yes, they are behind the front line. They are waiting for us. At night they stare into the distance, looking for the flashes of artillery shots, the harbingers of approaching freedom. When will we get there? I wonder, under the impression of a soldier's song. A company appears out of the rising dust clouds. The soldiers march in slender rows with their weapons behind their backs. Sweat drips from their faces, but despite this, they sing frantically. It's nothing that they have wrinkles under their eyes, and most of them are over 40 years old. You can feel the strength and faith in victory in their walk. The song is cut short and the trumpeter's signal is heard, calling for lunch. Lunch is delicious and no one is bothered by the fact that both dishes are mixed in one pot. The most fastidious are picked up in pairs. One gets 2 servings of soup, the other gets 2 servings of the second. I look at him until he disappears among the trees. You know each other, I hear from the side. A few steps away from the bench where I am sitting stands the company commander. I jump up and stand at attention. That's right, citizen senior sergeant, still on the partisan detachment. I answer. Let's sit down. He's a worldly guy. He loves the army. He doesn't tolerate slackers. Coper won't forget him for the rest of his life. I probably won't either. Oh, he gave us a lot of work. During training, before giving an order, he would show us how to do it, but then he would demand exact execution. Hey, the guys are afraid of him, but they love him too. Unless I don't finish something, that's the kind of commander the soldiers respect. They'll follow him in fire and water. Come on, let's go. You're supposed to get a gun. Can you shoot? Be calm, citizen senior sergeant. I hate to brag, but I'm a good shot. It was the subaltern who taught me that. We enter the dugout where the company armory is located. As soon as my eyesight gets used to the darkness, I distinguish the weapons, evenly laid out in rows on the cloak tents. One beside the other are long rifles with thin bayonets tied to the breech block. Near the wall are 2 handheld machine guns. Nearby lie several 10-shot FT. Behind them a PPHS, the object of special envy of the partisans, and some other weapons, carefully covered with several numbers of Zymachenzima. I pick up one of the papers and freeze with admiration when I see a sniper rifle. Such a rifle would suit me, I think to myself. However, the petty officer does not pay attention to my delight and orders me to sign for an ordinary rifle, gas, mask and devices for cleaning weapons. Maybe the one with a telescopic sight, citizen senior sergeant. I ask incredulously. You want a lot, answers the petty officer. Such rifles get only the best shooters, and then personally from the company commander. Don't be picky. Take what they give you and run to clean it. That's right, I answer. I turn around and go out, catching the end of the long barrel on the low ceiling of the dugout. Be careful, or you'll catch the fly. I hear in the wake. I sit down on the moss and slowly start to clean the rifle, but I think about the one with telescopic sight. From somewhere around the bend I hear singing. From over the mountains and rivers we came to the shore. I interrupt my work and listen to the melody of an unfamiliar marching song. The singing comes closer and clearer. I clearly distinguish the words, full of longing for my native country. Yes, there, behind the front line, they are waiting for us. At night they stare into the distance, looking for the flashes of artillery shots, the harbingers of approaching freedom. When will we get there? I wonder, under the impression of a soldier's song. A company appears out of the rising dust clouds. The soldiers march in slender rows with their weapons behind their backs. Sweat drips from their faces, but despite this, they sing frantically. It's nothing that they have wrinkles under their eyes, and most of them are over 40 years old. You can feel the strength and faith in victory in their walk. The song is cut short and the trumpeter's signal is heard, calling for lunch. Lunch is delicious, and no one is bothered by the fact that both dishes are mixed in one pot. The most fastidious are picked up in pairs. One gets 2 servings of soup, the other gets 2 servings of the second. After lunch comes a quiet hour, and then we clean our weapons. A few soldiers, under the direction of the petty officer, prepare targets for the upcoming shooting sessions. After the 3rd or 4th day of being in the company, I make an important conclusion for myself. It is not worth to give weapons for inspection before the appointed time, because the commanders will evaluate the work done by a D and the rifle will have to be cleaned again. When the time allotted according to the daily schedule for cleaning the weapon is over, the corporal will probably say, "Well, Private, very good." In the evening, the tailor Cooper returns. He brings half a duffel bag of lipeshki. That's what soldiers call large village dumplings with millet porridge or beans. It turns out that the tailor wandered into the village in search of a sewing machine. I found a sewing machine, but first of all I have to sew it for the owner, and then I'll start sewing for the officers. Today I got half a sack of tortillas for sewing a jacket. He gives them to everyone in turn. Furnish of my civilian clothes. By some miracle I still have my poplin shirt, which has been with me through 2 hospitals. When I learn that Cooper is going to go to the village tomorrow, I don't hesitate to offer. Trade me for some tortillas. All right. It's a beautiful chopper. Too bad about it, but whatever you want. Shmuel Betzel, and it's sold. Tell me, suddenly changes the subject. How do the Nazis deal with the Jews? I tell him about the Jewish ghetto in Rodzimierz. Cooper and the other soldiers next to him listen with concentration. They know about the new order established by the occupiers only from political education classes. I look at the tailor and see his eyes glaze over. Words stick in my throat. The formation is announced again. I think company sounds particularly sublime today. We're going to bed. A trumpet signal is blowing over the forest. A hard soldier's day has come to an end. I fall asleep under the quiet, measured steps of the sentry, which can be heard behind the thin wall, and in front of my eyes is a brand-new sniper rifle. I wake up long before rising. The dream about the magnificent rifle is over. I feel a nagging pain in my right shin. It is the wound. It's starting to get light. It's probably another 2 hours before I get up. I turn on my other side to get some sleep, but sleep does not come. In my mind I am transported behind the front line to my home. What is my mother doing there, my sister, who has probably grown up a lot? Or maybe the Germans have taken them somewhere? Get up. Wake up. Get up. I jumped up like a scalded man. Today I have to get dressed first by all means. I put my shoelaces in my pocket and get in line. I'm surprised to see the company commander. Maybe he is interested in how is the rise in the unit and whether the fathers are well engaged in physical exercises. Duty sergeant is running along the huts, looking inside, loudly swearing at the clerk, who has not yet risen. Nothing. Leave him alone, orders Lieutenant Ehlers in a calm voice. I'll take care of him myself. Follow me, march, shouts the duty officer and takes his place at the front of the column. See, pain in my leg is getting worse. I look left and right. Nearby fathers are running briskly. It's uncomfortable to lag behind. Runs through my head and I speed up the pace. Physical exercise ends. Another small jog to the moat. I wind up my sweatbands, wash my face, and only now I remember about the towel, which I forgot in a hurry. Nothing to do, I wipe myself with a handkerchief. I jog again, and again I feel pain in my right leg. "Not today's duty officer is too hard," says Private Kuyava loudly. That's because the company commander showed up. Someone responds. The runners raise columns of dust. And my leg, as it happens, hurts more and more. Probably should go to Jinka, I think. Immediately after breakfast we go to the firing range. Addresses the foreman to his assistant. "In that case I'll go to the Esculapists tomorrow." I continue to ponder. Today we have to shoot. After all, if all goes well, I can get a rifle with a telescopic sight. The very thought of it excites me. We come back from breakfast, and the Podyarushnik is still training the clerk. "What an exercise our staff are." Someone from the column jokes loudly. "The commander should come to the lift more often, or our clerk will die in the locker room." There is an explosion of laughter. "Company, sing," orders the petty officer. Over the mountains and rivers. Someone at the head of the column is singing. A sub-officer rides on a thoroughbred Mongol and shouts next to the marchers. Louder, you can't hear anything. "Didn't you fathers have breakfast?" I do not know this song, but just in case I open my mouth wide, so as not to incur the wrath of the commander. Finally, we arrive at the field firing range. The singing stops. The company stops. 10 minutes for a smoke break, allows the commander. With relief, I stretch out on the green grass, but Petty Officer Mazurik lifts us to our feet. "The smoke break was for me, but for you, weapons into goats." "What? Have you forgotten that there must be order in the army? Only do not prop up the rifles with the sights. You will shoot, and then you will shoot to God and complain that the weapon is bad." I see that some soldiers have rope straps or loops, with which they strengthen the rifle's mounts, and they stand as if they fit. Now we can rest. There is a pleasant hay smell from the meadows. One can hear someone sharpening a scythe. From above comes the rumble of an airplane, and it is immediately drowned out by the angry barking of anti-aircraft guns. After a moment, the guns are silent. Only in the azure sky hangs more black smoke. The company is resting. The smell of hay mingles with the strong smoke of makhorka, which is smoked by the fathers. The smoke of this incense long lingers over the place where we lie. I feel some amazing excitement before the first shooting for evaluation. I really want to do all the exercises for an A to get a sniper rifle later. I look at the faces of my comrades. Each of them looks serious and focused. Leaning against a heavily bent birch tree, Coper is sitting. I approach him. "You didn't go to the village?" "How could I go when today there's shooting? I won't be sewing uniforms at the front. You have to be able to shoot accurately there." "That's right, Coper. In this war with the Nazis, we must pay for the great evil they've done to us. Hence, I'm afraid of shooting. I'm afraid of the rattle and the recoil of the rifle. There's nothing to be afraid of. You were so right just now. You're old, experienced. Remember, you must do everything calmly. Aim carefully at the bull's-eye and pull the trigger slowly. You won't even know when the shot will be fired, and it's a total guarantee that the bullet will hit the target. That's good for you to say you've shot so many times. What about me? Me, a tailor, I didn't need it. I lived by needle and thread, did my own thing. You must put your doubts aside now. Do as I tell you, but calmly, without nerves. Stop smoking. Company, form up. E interrupts our conversation. The commander is standing in front of the formation. "Well, it's not difficult to shoot," he says. "The target is at a distance of 100 meters. Time is not limited. Check the results after each shot. The shift shoots once, then all stand up and go to the targets. Each person takes 3 shots. Now 6 volunteers for the first shift, 3 steps forward." I step forward. Commands are given quickly. "To the front line, march." We get 1 round each, and again the command is given. "Mo, to the firing line, march." I lie down and take a comfortable shooting position. I load the rifle and point the sight at the bull's-eye. Go the right, 1 at a time, fire. I hear a loud command and almost pull the trigger. A little more, and I would have missed the chance to become a sniper. I decide to do what Coper just told me to do. I start aiming again. The fly's already in the slot. I carefully align it and fire. Almost simultaneously, there's a gunshot from the left, followed by Kersey. "God damn it, it's your fault." I pretend I didn't hear the implication and exhale calmly. We go to the targets. On the way, Commander once again reminds, 3 steps before the targets. Everyone stops. No one approaches them until the result is recorded. From afar, I glance at my target, looking for a hole. I'm relieved when I spot a dot. But it turns out that the coveted dot is nothing but a fly basking in the sun. I walk on, saddened, with my head down. The commander approaches my target. I stand at attention and see him crossing out a hole on it with a chemical pencil. 2 more times we go to the targets, and each time the petty officer marks the place of the hit with an X. In the evening, we'll have to ask the company commander for a sniper rifle, I think. After the shooting, we are surrounded by comrades and ask with interest. Did you hit it? Where did you aim? Someone lightly stabs me in the back and asks, Lend me your rifle. I look back at the lover of other people's weapons and see Coper's round, good-natured face. Let me shoot with your rifle. It hits so accurately. Oh, Coper, I would gladly give it to you, but understand, at the front you'll have to shoot with your own rifle. I can't lend you my rifle there. At the front, we won't be shooting for marks. No, of course, not for a grade, but for life. In the partisan detachment, I was taught to believe in your weapon. Both your rifle and mine are equally good, it all depends on the shooter. That's true, of course. And I'll shoot with my rifle, but now I'd prefer yours. 1 by 1, the shots rattle off. Few misses. We can safely say that the fathers did not fail, and in vain worries the commander that they will be hard in battle. Even Taylor Cooper managed to hit the target. After the exercise, all those who hit the target 3 times, the commander announces gratitude in front of the formation. We take the targets and, singing a bravura song, return to camp. During the lunch break, Lieutenant Allers calls me to his office. I enter and click my heels loud. I saw today at the shooting range that our partisan training has not gone to waste for you. You're a good shot. Can't I get a sniper rifle? I ask incredulously. That's why I called you in. You deserve a rifle. Go to the sergeant major, he already knows. Yes, citizen lieutenant. Thank you, I exclaim joyfully. Immediately, on hot tracks, I go to Senior Sergeant Mazurek and hand over the rifle I received yesterday. In return, I take a beautiful Mosin with a telescopic sight. I clean the rifle with reverence, and Sergeant Kuklianovsky, who has already become a sniper for several months, explains to me the peculiarities of its device. You see, he explains, our task on the battlefield is to destroy the most important targets. This means snipers, officers, machine gun crews, and all those who delay the advance of our troops. Tell me, how do you recognize an officer? How do I know? I've never thought about it. Well, then listen carefully. A private has a rifle or a machine gun, and an officer only exceptionally has a long-barreled weapon. But he has a clipboard, a field bag, binoculars. You have to remember that, especially on the battlefield. Maybe that's enough to start with. He asks after a minute, work, and I'll go to the Deputy Commander for Political and Educational Work. Today I have to write an article for the Wall newspaper about your shooting. I'm not happy about my sniper rifle for long. The wound, though well healed, gives me a dull pain in my leg. So in the end I had to go to the paramedic Zenka. I get a few days off from classes and together with other sick clean up the area. I'm terribly angry at this turn of events. One day I was unexpectedly called to the company office. Here the foreman informs about my transfer to the economic platoon as a clerk. Of course, on the one hand, the duties of a staff clerk do not require participation in tedious classes. You do not have to dress quickly. No one rushes you to the morning exercise. But on the other hand, you are away from direct combat operations. Still, it is not easy to be a clerk during the war. You could always find a chemical pencil somewhere, but the paper needed for all sorts of statements, reports, lists and certificates is much more difficult. More than once I gnawed on the end of a pencil, thinking about where I could urgently find paper. I even had to use the packaging of various concentrates for stationary needs, and not once could see how the clerk of the economic platoon vigilantly monitors the unpacking of foodstuffs in order to take these scraps of paper from the cook. Company clerks are in a much worse position. They do not even have such an opportunity. Gradually, the compilation of various documents related to the food supply of the battalion becomes a habit for me. Corporal German, a Silesian, takes care of me in a fatherly way and often brings me a piece of bread with stew. Eat up, son, because you're so thin. Get well soon. Summer is in full swing. The weather is beautiful, but we don't notice it. Every day is full of tense anticipation for us. When are we finally going to perform? We ask the officers now and then, but no one can give us a definite answer. To us in the battalion arrive new sergeants who have just graduated from the divisional school, and with the energy typical of graduates, begin to train their subordinates. Sometimes Coper appears in my dugout and tells me about the news in the 5th Company. He's angry at the new squad leader for the fact that he is always picking on him. For poorly made bed, for not cleaned rifle, even for dirt under his fingernails. The tailor is already tired of this camp life in the forest and fiddling with the alteration of overcoats. He dreams of marching westward to his homeland. Thus passes the half of July. The cloudless sky is literally streaming with heat. In my spare moments I look at the units returning from field exercises. On tired faces of soldiers, sweat mixes with dust. Only the whites of eyes shine joyfully. The guys are not sparing their strength, preparing for the upcoming battles. Combat training, of course, is most important, but we do not forget about our appearance. We wash our uniforms, sew up white cuffs, and most importantly, we try to renew our tattered Confederates. To do this, everyone needs wire. Even barbed wire, after removing the spikes, can be put into caps. After such remodeling, it changes beyond recognition. One day a sharp trumpet blast breaks into the monotonous camp life. An alarm. The sounds of the signal spreads threateningly over the forest. Companies run back from the training grounds to the location. Working in the kitchen, soldiers disperse to their units. I hastily packed my stationery in the ammunition box, put my meagre belongings, a pair of shirts, a towel and soap, in my duffel bag and left the wardroom. Everywhere there is lively traffic. Companies of the battalion, in full equipment, almost running hurry to the assembly area. The field kitchens of the utility platoon are preparing for departure with true rearguard enthusiasm. Horses nervously shuffle in the harness, continuously wagging their ears. A loud shout from Corporal Herman is enough for one of the horses to startle out of its seat, dragging the smoking kitchen behind it. Unaccustomed to the harness, it gallops blindly. "Stop, stop, damn it! Where the hell are you going?" Shouts the corporal frantically. But his appeals are of no avail. The wagon clings to a large pine tree, the straps burst with a crack, the field kitchen falls sideways, and soup pours out from under the loose lid. The horse, indifferent to what it has done, is quietly nibbling at the grass. We run up to the scene. Burning our palms, we put the kitchen on wheels. There is not a trace left of the battalion, and its rear is still unable to move from the place. Time, which is especially valuable in the army, flies inexorably. Well, finally, the commander of the economic platoon sighs with relief, when more than 10 minutes pass and the rear column stretches out on the road. At that moment, we hear the signal of rebellion. While the drill, I hear the voice of Corporal Herman. I sit down on a tree stump and start unpacking my stationery. No sooner had I laid out my papers than the platoon commander calls. Scribe. Quickly to me? I jump out of my seat and run in his direction. And here I see the commander red as a cancer and the cooks stretched out in a string. "What the hell were you looking at?" "It's not enough that half of the soup spilled out of one pot and the porridge burned," he scolds the guilty. But what does he want from me? I frantically think. I have nothing to do with it. I approach the cooks and we'll talk more about the burnt porridge. In the meantime, together with the chief clerk, you must put things in order and make sure that the cauldron doesn't smell of burning. I stand like a stump, puzzled as to why it is me who has to wash the cauldrons. The cooks, wearing white jackets, have already started the task, and I'm still pondering. "What are you waiting for?" Loudly calls me Koranji. I turn to him and see him looking at my small figure with a murderous look. And yet I gather courage and in a calm, but at the same time resolute tone I say, "Citizen Koranji, I will not clean the cauldrons." It seems that all the blood rushes to the already red face of the commander. "Get to work at once." "I'll show you what an army is. I'll show you what an army is. That's all we need. Well, what are you waiting for?" "Citizen Koranji, I didn't volunteer for the army to wash cauldrons and I'm trying to object again." "Why are you talking nonsense to me here? This is an army, not a guerrilla unit. Wash the boilers or I'll take you to Major Drozdov, the battalion commander." For a while we stare at each other in silence. I stretch out at attention and I think that maybe I should still get to work and wash this unfortunate boiler. But don't let yourself be intimidated. You've already been under fire, so convince the battalion commander that your place is in the formation unit. Well, you'll regret your donkey stubbornness. Breaks the silence. I, Citizen Koranchi, agree to any, even the most difficult task, but not to wash boilers. So that in 10 minutes you will be with a clean collar and polished boots. Says the officer in a calm voice. I'll take you to the battalion commander. Yes, sir. I turn around and run to clean my boots and sew on the cuff, which I had prepared for the day of entry into the homeland. My hands are trembling with excitement and fear. I have to meet Major Drozdov for the first time, and even to explain why I did not fulfill the task. Maybe I'll be put under arrest. Flashes in my head an alarming thought. In addition, I crookedly sew the cuff. I have no time to sew it, as the commander appears and we are going to the battalion headquarters. I follow the Kurunshi at a distance of a few steps. As if a condemned man, I move my legs heavily and stare at his carefully polished boots. The forest around fills with the noise of returning units. We hear the clinking of wokes. We are approaching the headquarters dugout. Near it nervously walks some subaltern and greedily inhales the smoke of a thick cigarette. From the dugout comes someone's voice, obviously justifying himself. My Koranchi enters into a conversation with a subaltern unknown to me. You see, complains the subaltern, those damn horses ran into an anti-tank gun. Nothing happened to them, but one soldier from the servants was hurt. Not badly, they made more noise. So now the battalion commander is calling. I think he's already got someone in confession. Yes, the commander of the machine gun company. After this alarm, probably a lot of people will get hurt today. The old man is as angry as a wasp. What are you doing here? See this guy. The Koranji points his finger at me. He says I won't wash the kettles. He's my clerk. A partisan, but he pretends to be an intellectual. The field kitchen overturned and soup spilled out of one cauldron and the porridge burned in the other. And this guy didn't join the army to clean cauldrons. Have you heard anything like that? From the battalion commander's office, a bailiff comes out and mumbles something under his nose. Vasek, stop. My Koranchi calls him. But Vasek doesn't stop. He waves his hand doomedly and walks on. I turn my gaze to the lieutenant. He's pulling on his uniform and adjusting his belt. He hesitates for a moment, adjusts his belt once more, and hesitantly lifts the cloak tent blocking the entrance. Now my Koranchi is getting nervous. He looks at me reproachfully, and in his eyes one can read that his clerk is the culprit of the coming storm in the hitherto calm economic platoon. I am thinking over a plan of defence and perhaps a more credible explanation of my deed, but each of the options has some disadvantages. Out of the dugout comes a sub-guard, followed by the major and the bail bondsman. The major is the battalion commander, the lieutenant is his deputy for political and educational work. The commander of the economic platoon, with a vigorous parade step, approaches the major. Citizen Major. The clerk refused to execute the order, and explains to him what happened. Dead silence ensues. The major's formidable gaze rests on my figure. I think I can hear my heart pounding hard. My legs become wooden and my knees tremble. Come here. I hear the major's words addressed to me. I hardly move from my seat. I come up and report. For a moment I cast a glance at my Koranjago. The platoon commander's face expresses nothing. The deputy battalion commander smiles. You are a sergeant, and where is your patch? Asks the major in broken Polish. I don't know what to answer him. So you don't want to clean the boilers. But war is not won only with a rifle. The work of a cook is also an honourable duty. A ladle is just as necessary in war as a rifle. Try fighting without food. He stops talking and casts me a frown, but I detect a glimmer of warmth in it. My tongue goes numb. The Karunji shifts from foot to foot and is also silent. Only the deputy commander for political and educational work feels at ease, and his face shines with a smile. This open, good-natured face gives me courage, and I try to explain myself. Citizen Major, I really want to fight, and I can't bear the thought that instead I have to scrub the cauldrons of burnt porridge. I told you, a war isn't won with a rifle alone. Isn't that clear to you yet? Citizen Major, maybe he'd be more useful in battalion reconnaissance. I was with the scouts today. They lack one machine gunner. Mate, wait, but that's not allowed. In that case, all the cooks will leave the kitchen. I'm standing at attention, but if I could, I'd rush to the deputy commander with gratitude. But, Citizen Major, a guerrilla will be more useful in reconnaissance than in the kitchen. In the economic platoon, we can send some elderly soldier, and there are enough of them in our battalion. And you know how to shoot a machine gun? Asks the battalion commander. Yes, Citizen Major. I answered without hesitation. In the partisan detachment, I was the first number of the machine gun, fired a German machine gun. Besides, I know many other types. In order, you interrupts me, Major. Today transfer him to the 1st platoon of the company, Lieutenant Kazimierczak. That's all. Do it. He turns to the Koronze. Let's go. But the Major stops us and says goodbye. It's bad that the porridge burned. You can't do that. After heavy exercises, soldiers should get a tasty meal. And you, partisan, he threatens me with a finger. Remember, war is won not only with a rifle. Every soldier must do what he is ordered by the commander. Well, go, and sew your stripes, so that comrades can see what rank you have. After the transfer of affairs in the economic platoon, already at dusk, I'm in the 4th company. According to the order of the battalion commander, I was sent to the 1st platoon, which performs the functions of freelance battalion reconnaissance. Although it is quite late, everywhere is boiling work. Units are preparing for the march. Houses made of poles stand already without roofs. Removed raincoats are strapped to the bags, which lie in rows along the alley. The platoon commander, a senior sergeant, introduces me to my future number 2, Private Zenion Krakowiak. Then the two of us go to the petty officer for a machine gun, on the way taking advantage of the opportunity. I take a close look at my comrade with whom we will now form one whole. The calculation of the handheld machine gun. The armory is already packed on the wagon. We are looking for the company commander to get a machine gun from him. Krakowiak, meanwhile, asks me about my family, about military service, in general, about everything. However, I ask similar questions. He lights up when he learns that I am from a partisan unit, and asks with interest, "How is it there in the forest?" I promise to tell him about it another time, when I have more time. Krakowiak comes from Tarnopol district. In 1941 he was drafted into the Red Army, and in the same year he was wounded in the left thigh. Then hospital, reserve regiment, construction battalion, and again reserve regiment. When he learned that the Polish army was being formed in the USA, he secured a transfer to our troops. A month ago he received a letter from home. My parents wrote that my brother and sister were sent by the Germans to forced labor in Germany. I have my own accounts with the Swabians. It concludes the story. And now it depends on us how quickly we get even with them. I wish it would start sooner. Half of your family is already free and mine is far away from here in Wolodzimierz. But there are still fascists there. Are my mother and my little sister alive? I sigh. Nothing. We'll soon liberate your Wolodzimierz. The Germans are fleeing so fast that we'll have to hurry to catch up with them. We can move out any minute. I know a little about this. The trial alarm is over, but packing is more important than 100 such alarms. The petty officer and the wagon are stationed around the bend in the road. We have another half-kilometre to go. On the way we look at the camp, which in the morning shone with impeccable cleanliness of alleys. Now most of the huts are dismantled, and in the thickets are camouflaged cars, wagons, guns with harnessed horses. Everything is ready for the march. Here is the company transport. Wagons are loaded beyond the allowable norm. Between the piles of bags stick out the barrels of machine guns. A petty officer is standing near one of these wagons and scolding the soldiers. To hell with such wagons who think that the company's transport is a warehouse for all sorts of bags. With overloaded wagons you will come to hell, not to Poland. Dump this stuff at once. But none of the wagoners hurries to carry out the order. The sergeant gets angry. He snatches the whip from the hand of the nearest wagoner and whips it on the crotches of the horses standing calmly. The animals jerk violently, one of the straps breaks, and the cart stands still. "I told you so," shouts the foreman. The broken harness probably has a calming effect on him because he calms down a little and starts rolling a cigar. We wait for a while just in case. "Don't hurry," whispers Krakowiak. "In such a situation you can get a scolding for anything. It's better not to show our faces to him yet." But the petty officer notices us. "Why are you hanging around here, Zinek?" He turns to Krakowiak. Permission to report, Citizen Sergeant. We've come to get a machine gun. Krekawyak points his finger at me. He has been transferred to our car. They found a time to send reinforcements too. Everything is packed up, and here they are looking for a machine gun, but maybe there's a silver lining. If I get a chance, you can help me clean this place up. All these bags from the wagons. Yes, sir. We answer in unison and get down to business. We unload on the ground the bags, gas masks, helmets, and even kettles, with which the soldiers are so reluctant to part. I pile the soldiers' belongings off the wagon, but I think to myself, who will sort it all out later, and I decided never to put my things in someone else's care. Finally, we get to the weapons. The petty officer takes out of a massive box a conscientiously preserved Degtyarev, a spare barrel, cleaning equipment, and a set of necessary accessories, as well as 2 bags with magazines. In addition, I receive 350 rounds of ammunition, 3 grenades, including 1 anti-tank grenade. If the sergeant hadn't issued me a raincoat as well, we wouldn't have been able to carry it all. The sun had already set when we, a little tired, returned to the location of the company. No one is still awake. The soldiers are going about their business so that everything will be ready by the appointed day, and that day is maybe only a few hours away. Krekawyak and I try to get comfortable on the moss so we can get some sleep, but sleep doesn't come. We lie side by side and look up into the July starry sky. From the east, somewhere in the distance, we hear the rumble of airplanes, heavy and steady. It grows with every second. Krekawyak pushes me with his elbow. Are you asleep? No. It'll probably start soon. They must be bringing in some big pills for Hitler. Everything's shaking. I can't wait to get going. I can't stay calm at the thought that they're waiting for us there. We discussed the upcoming march to the west for a long time. In the morning, we started packing our equipment. We diligently cleaned a machine gun we received yesterday, filled the magazines, carefully checking each cartridge. Then we roll up the overcoats. I do not do it very skillfully. Rolled overcoat is too thick. In the end, I give up on it in the hope that everything will somehow work out. After breakfast, I find out that in an hour the formation in full gear. Only then I realize how much I still lack soldier skill. With fear, I look at the mass of various things that I have to carry on my own back, almost depressed. I remember the recent times when instead of all this I had only a machine gun with a few magazines and a piece of bread and lard. And here is a heavy duffel bag with ammunition, a trench coat, underwear, a bar of soap, a towel and loincloths. The belt crushes under the weight of grenades, a spare barrel for the machine gun and a spatula. The heavy machine gun sticks out over the helmet, which at every movement moves off on the nose. In addition, the poorly rolled overcoat rubs my neck mercilessly, and that's not all. I just don't know where to hang my gas mask. The formation is starting, and I'm not ready yet. I stand in the second row and pray to all the saints that I did not see the company commander. Meanwhile, the commander of the 4th Company, together with Major Drozdov and his deputy for political and educational work, appear in front of the formation. After taking a report on the readiness of the company to march, the battalion commander says, "Now let's see how ready it is." The first rank 5 steps forward. Krekawyak, who was shielding me from the omnipresent gaze of the commander, takes 5 steps forward, and I find myself now as in a shop window. The major passes between the ranks and stops every second. Bad, bad, bad. He repeats, "We won't go that far. Here, please, the company is ready. Ah, here is my scout. I hear above my ear. What was it worse to clean cauldrons in the housekeeping platoon? What a sight you have." I'm afraid to even look at him. It seems that I would rather fall through the ground than to look into the blue, deep set under the thick eyebrows of the major. Fortunately, the commander is no longer interested in my person. He has to check the readiness to march the entire battalion. I am relieved that I am not an exception. In the company is always easier to bear trouble. However, the major returns and, all ready to march, pulls out of the line. I stand with the other offenders. Combat notes that we look like Ryazan women at the market, not soldiers of his battalion. And now, to make sure that you are convinced that I am telling the truth, we will have a class. He says at the end of the inspection. To the right, I hardly have time to think that my preparation for marching is as bad as the major's with the Polish language, when the next command come. Run, march. I take a couple of steps and already hear another command. Get down, crawl. March. My helmet moves down on my nose. I can't see anything. I try to lift it up, but to no avail. The badly rolled over coat, sticking out over the baggage bag, moved even higher and pressed against the back of the helmet. Get up, run, march. Now the spare barrel had moved from my side to my stomach and was hitting my knees. At the moment when I push it back to its place, the helmet falls on my nose, and so on alternately. On top of the agony, I am very much hampered by a shovel, a pouch with grenades, and the unfortunate gas mask. Meanwhile, the teams are pushing each other. Get down. Crawl, march, stand up, run, march, and finally, when I no longer have the strength to move my legs, the coveted. Out of breath, I fix my helmet, from under which sweat streams down my face. Ready to march, part of the company stretches along the forest road. Exhausted by classes, we slowly return to the ranks. Well, soldiers, summarizes the battalion commander, you yourself now perfectly see how your company is prepared for the march, and on the way will have to enter into battle. Then what are we going to do with you? Shame on you. Me too. Well, company commander, you don't have much time left. I want the company to be in full readiness by lunchtime. My deputy will say a few more words. Please. The major gestures for the lieutenant to speak. The lieutenant pulls on his belt, adjusts his confederate and, as always smiling, begins. Soldiers. We stand on the threshold of our native country, exhausted by 5 years of Hitler's captivity. The whole nation is fighting the invaders with weapons in their hands. There, behind the front line, they are waiting for us. We'll fight for a new, democratic Poland. Fix the shortcomings in your equipment. Be ready for a long march and hard fighting. We have a noble goal before us, the freedom of democratic Poland. Silence reigns in the ranks. The battalion officers leave, and the company commander, sweating like the rest of us, gives practical advice. What, how, and where to reinforce. The soldiers help each other to roll up overcoats and pack bags. The work is going well, so by the appointed time we are really ready to march. With lunch we manage faster than ever. The major's orderly comes running. The marching column lines up on the forest road. The age-old forest is full of turmoil and noise. Then a short break is called, and we step off the road into the shade of the tree. Not even a few minutes are to be wasted. The free time must be used for rest. The movement of the troops does not cease for a moment. 4 horses are pulling regimental guns, camouflaged with birch boughs, along the sandy clearing with difficulty. The 1st Battalion is passing by us. Lying down, we are watching those who are coming. On dusty and sweating faces of soldiers, we can see smiles and satisfaction. We are going to liberate our motherland. How many, in a column of 4, stand up? Mars Lieutenant Kazimierczak. We've been walking for over an hour. Dusk is falling. Above we can hear the rumble of airplanes. Corn crackers are sailing in the sky, and even triplets. Night is their ally. Now until morning they will hang behind the line of German trenches, Krakowiak explains to me. We are not having a good conversation. The weight of equipment and weapons does its own thing. No one has a desire to chat. 15-minute rest, transmitted by the battalion column. We meet this news with joy. We go to the roadside on the right side of the road, stretch our legs as high as possible to rest. Is nigh down on your side, advises Krakowiak, or you'll get sciatica and you won't be able to stretch out. I do not understand very well what sciatica is, but just in case, trusting Zenek's experience, I follow his recommendation. We lie there and listen as the company commander, without getting off his horse, gives orders to the commander of the scouts, Staff Sergeant Faye. You must somewhere on the road to get wagons. Assign the nimble guys and don't let them come back without trains. Yes, Lieutenant Commander. Sub-Lieutenant Kazimierczak rides off to the head of the battalion column, and the senior sergeant calls 3 scouts and shows them the village on the right side of the road. See those huts? That's right. Ming the wagons from there. Get up. The command is heard. Let's move on. On the spot remain only 3 soldiers who are tasked to get the carts. After a few kilometers, scouts catch up with the company driving horses harnessed to carts. Without stopping, we dump some of the equipment on them. Shoulders became lighter, which means we go more lively. The example of our company is followed by others. In the morning, when it dawned, in the column can see many of these carts. The column with short stops continues to move. We pass by destroyed villages, in some places only hulks of ovens stick out. The inhabitants of the surviving houses look with interest at the soldiers in Confederate uniforms. They have not seen them for a long time. At night we pass the newly built bridge over the River Turia. Here a few days ago was the front line. How far is it to Bug? We ask the officers during the parking lot, but we don't get a concrete answer. The awakening day reveals the horrors of war to an even greater extent. The fields are riddled with trenches half filled from the explosions of bombs and shells. Above the ground is the smell of burning mixed with the stench of decomposing bodies. One of the soldiers slightly moves aside from the road and explodes on a mine. Further on we go in a tight formation, precisely sticking to the road. Around noon we pass the memorable for me town of Yagodzin. It is here with heavy battles partisans came out of the encirclement. Further on the road goes along the railroad track Kovel. Shelm Lubelski turned to such an extent as if it had been ploughed with the devil's plough. There are already less than 20 kilometres to the Bug, and beyond it, the Polish land. It is a sultry July afternoon. The forest through which we are passing smells of tar. People are very exhausted, horses are breathing heavily. Clouds of red dust rise above the column. It is so fine that it clogs all the pores and throats. Men, horses, weapons, everything is powdered with dust. There's a pleasant breeze from the west. It brings with it a slightly noticeable coolness and a light smell of meadow flowers. At the head of the company rides Lieutenant Kazimierczak, and every 10 steps rises in the stirrups. "Guys, over there," he suddenly shouts and shows his hand. There, behind the bushes, is the Bug. For a moment we slow our steps. We look for the river and Poland behind it. And in a minute, among the meadows with haystacks, a shining ribbon of the Bug appears. The column spontaneously equalizes. Even the most tired quickly pull up to their places in the line. We pass a small hillside, and immediately behind it lazily flows the river. The sappers are building the second stage of the bridge, which will provide traffic in 2 directions.